We can't call them Tateryche anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we could, but they're Operation Mindcrime now. The split is official, and this is the first album that's going to be released under this name. This is Geoff Tate's new band ever since the Queensryche fiasco from a couple of years ago has been solved, settled, etc. And there's a great opportunity for redemption with this album. Redemption for Geoff Tate, who definitely had to undergo a media firestorm after Frequency Unknown, and redemption for myself, considering I was certainly part of that firestorm with my review of Frequency Unknown in 2013. So, with the key, the slate is wiped clean, and we have the first portion of a trilogy of albums that Geoff Tate would like to release within the next 12 to 18 month period. He'd like to aim to maybe release one every 6 months if he could. I think that's a little ambitious, but Geoff might have the opportunity to pull that one off. It's a huge conceptual piece that involves a lot of different factors. It is an international one that deals with virtual systems of currency, which gives this a bit of a sci-fi edge to go alongside of the progressive metal, hard rock, and really just heavy metal exterior that is surrounded within this disc. And of course the personnel is a little bit different with folks such as Kelly Gray and one of the bassists that was in Disturbed. So we look into this album and we look into what Frequency Unknown gave us, which was a very rushed feel, and this one immediately feels like it has a lot more polish behind it, a lot more of a oomph to it. Though with Choices, the very first track on this album, you have to approach a little bit differently than you do with many conventional albums, where traditionally the first and the last track, the bookend tracks, end up being the ones that really set up success or failure. With Choices, it's more so trying to dictate and get some of the central themes introduced a little bit to a listener, and while this is one that's lyrically kind of sparse, the music definitely feels and definitely sounds a little bit better. There's a little bit more of a dedication to trying to just make a solid melody and sort of introduce the listener to a world that is a little bit different, a little bit otherworldly to that of our own, that perhaps could be actually a symbol of our future, something that is upcoming. Now, with the sparsity of the lyrics in Choices, it can immediately sort of be written off as a poor first track, but instead it goes right comfortably into Burn. Now, you're going to hear throughout this album, and it's introduced with songs such as Burn, some clips to sort of progress the story along, to sort of keep the story going, and it's going to remind you a little bit of Operation Mindcrime in a way. It's considering it's sort of meant to set up some themology for a song, either that or it's being used to set up perhaps what the next couple of tracks are meant to illustrate, either that or illuminate, with the remainder of that work being handled through the music and the lyricism. But Burn and Reinventing the Future, both are tracks that some people have heard prior to this album's release, are fairly decent. There is a lot more of a hard rock direct approach as opposed to what they were able to do before, or what you would had heard previously from Geoff Tate. However, this is a style that works quite well for this album. It's one that gives it a little bit more oomph, especially in this early stage of this release. Moving into Ready to Fly and then finally into Discussions in a Smoke-Filled Room, you're getting a little bit more story that is arced and attached to this, especially with the latter track of the two, which really seems to be discussing the elimination of somebody based around perhaps something that they have seen or something that they have become a part of. Think about how Coheed and Cambria was able to do the Afterman duality. Think about how they were able to do that two-album series, and you'll kind of understand that even though this feels like a lot's happening right away, it's one where this is a trilogy that's supposed to set up multiple different angles and arcs and somehow all connect together, as opposed to being one that directly follows a linear story path. So it has a little bit of that different feel and that different glow to it. Now, musically speaking, whenever you get into the stranger hearing voices and should I say on cue, it gets a little bit disjointed. It gets a little bit strange. It gets a little off-putting because it seems as though some of these musical tracks, coupled with the lyricism, don't exactly work very well. And The band was certainly attempting to do some new things to kind of paint this new reality within this album, and by and large they were able to accomplish a lot of what they're aiming for from a musical standpoint, and the lyrics are just sort of half-cocked. They're a little weak at points in order to try to advance the storyline. It's definitely not one that has and boasts the same solidarity of classic concept albums such as Metropolis 2 or Operation Mindcrime. On Cue is especially one that feels just a bit strange from the lyrical and musical coupling theory, where it just doesn't really present itself in a very strong way. And speaking of strong, I need to really address the fact that Geoff doesn't really exhibit his high range very much on this album at all. In fact, at times his voice can seem a little bit processed, which can illuminate that whole future idea, but at the same time, it's also one where he really seems to cap off his voice at a certain level. Now, whether this is a question of ability or whether or not he can still do it is anybody's ballgame at this juncture. However, it seems that a lot of these tracks really would have benefited a lot from that additional high range to sort of amplify a theme, either that or create a little bit more of a memorable moment within a song. But I have to say that whenever you get into the final portions of this album, especially the final two tracks, Kicking in the Door and The Fall, this is where the key, part 1, really starts to amplify and really becomes a very solid affair, at least from the last couple representations that you get of it. Kicking in the Door would have been a suitable finale by its own right. It certainly seems to be setting up quite a bit, and you could have certainly been left on a cliffhanger well enough by this track, considering the themology of just the language of its title, as well as the lyricism that's within it, the softness of it, and the sort of, it's getting toward a little bit more of a melancholic, a little bit of a strange nature, so that alone could have been a satisfactory finale. But whenever you add The Fall in, which is a 6.5-minute long finale for this album, it is certainly one that is well received and well thought out. And this is a track that I'm certainly happy that they included on the album and did so at the position that they did, considering it delivers the theme's version of a cliffhanger, not to mention it also gives you a real satisfactory look as to what this band can potentially achieve. Really, whenever it comes to the hard rock department, and reminding you of a lot of the Queensryche favorites, such as Eyes of a Stranger, either that or maybe even a little bit of Silent Lucidity. It's crazy how this track really mirrors a lot of that Empire, Operation Mindcrime, that era of Queensryche in its writing style, and it's one where the band really seems and feels like they have come together as a whole and really done something very strong. And that is a nice thing to witness, let me tell you. And considering it's the last real representation, the last effort that you get off of this disc, it is welcome, not to mention it really makes you excited to hear what's going to happen with part number 2. You really want to know what comes and happens next. So far, we're looking pretty good. The problem is that the disjointed nature of some of these tracks and the songwriting just being okay kind of does hurt it a good bit. And this is talking about the whole as opposed to talking about just individual tracks. This is something that certainly seems like the band is kind of testing out the waters. They still have their floaties on in the pool. They're not yet accustomed to being in the deep end. And this is something that over time I think will only improve. This is a 75 out of 100 album, but it's one that leaves on a very high note, because if that wasn't present, it would have been a bit lower, and that would have been kind of bad. But overall, this is an experience that, while it can get very tedious throughout its 48 minutes, does give you enough moments to really make you feel that Operation Mindcrime has something to offer listeners. Not to mention, the overall trilogy of album idea is extremely alluring. It's one that makes you continue to want to listen. So that much has been done fairly well. But I want to know what you guys think. What do you guys think about The Key by Operation Mindcrime? Kind of a strange disc, a different beast, to say the least. I want to know in the comments below what you think about this disc and what you think about Operation Mindcrime as a whole. Geoff Tate, of course, now fronting his own project. We're going to be talking about his old band, Queensryche, who has an album coming out here in about 2 weeks entitled Condition Human. We're going to speak about how it seems strange that both of them, once again, are trying to release albums right around the same time with that one. So subscribe and stick around if you're a fan of Queensryche. I'm coverkillernation. I thank you very much. Leave your thoughts on the key in the comments below, and I'll talk to you later. Also, check out the reviews we've done for artists such as David Gilmour. We still have a couple more coming up for Chris Cornell, Shine Down, and Scale the Summit. So you're going to want to stay tuned. I'll talk to you later.